Bob Woodward of the Watergate fame, a very famous reporter, has come out with a bombshell report about what Trump knew about the coronavirus while he was downplaying it publicly. He knew that the coronavirus was, quote, deadly, and he was caught recorded saying these things, and then publicly he was saying the opposite in order to, he says, be a strong leader, which we all know he isn't. But in the reality, it was just about downplaying the virus so that he could look better, because it's always about marketing for him, marketing himself and marketing his presidency. So here's from the Woodward report. This will be the biggest national security threat you face in your presidency, National Security Advisor Robert C. O'Brien told Trump, according to a new book by Washington Post associate editor Bob Woodward. This is going to be the roughest thing you face. So this was told to Trump. Matthew Pottinger, the deputy national security advisor, agreed. He told the president that after reaching contacts in China, it was evident that the world faced a health emergency on par with the flu pandemic of 1918, which killed an estimated 50 million people worldwide. 10 days later, Trump called Woodward and revealed that he thought the situation was far more dire than what he had been saying publicly. He said this to a reporter. You just breathe the air and that's how it's passed, Trump said in the February 7th call. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff, the president repeated for emphasis. It's impossible to read his cadence. So this was caught on audio. Woodward, because he's a reporter and Trump decided to spill his guts to him, he recorded it, and here's what he said.
I think he's going to have it in good shape, but it's a very tricky situation. It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
But in March, Trump was tweeting, comparing the coronavirus to the flu and saying that they were basically equivalent. He tweeted in March 9th, so last year, 37,000 Americans died from the common flu. It averages between 27,000 and 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. At this moment, there are 546 confirmed cases of coronavirus with 22 deaths. Think about that. So Trump privately was saying that it was much worse than the flu and publicly comparing it to the flu. Now, I'm reminded of the fact that the government seemed to know, and Fauci, that masks would be effective much more earlier than they told the public. And that was an effort to save masks and PPE for essential workers and people in the healthcare industry. So I don't like when the government obfuscates the truth in any regard, but this is an entirely different level. Trump knew how deadly it was and was putting out propaganda that was contrary to his own thoughts. And I just think he's not even conscious about how much he lies. It's pathological.
It's not just downplaying it either, Emma. That was March 9th, where the remarks he made where he was comparing it to the flu, and of course we know now when he was downplaying the number of deaths. But on February 28th, so 11 days before that, he was in South Carolina saying that it's a hoax. And a hoax is far different from even downplaying. It's actually denying that it even exists, that it's somehow fabricated by somebody, someone else. It also just goes to show you that most presidencies, almost all that I can think of, are either rise or fall because of something that the president has no control over, whoever that president is, whether it's 9/11, whether it's the tech boom for Bill Clinton, whether it's the Iran hostage crisis for Jimmy Carter, whether it's the jobs boom that helped to bring, that allowed Barack Obama to then come out of a recession. So I do think that what you're looking at here is something that was out of the control of the president, but you're also looking at a president who, because of what you just said, this pathological lying that's a reflexive operation for the president. Because of that, it even seems worse. And that was what Bob Woodward was able to key in on. I've read, several of Bob Woodward's books, actually. Shadow is one that comes to mind. And there are parts of Bob Woodward's books where I will look and I will just shake my head because I can't believe he is going on sources for such a thing. I remember specifically there was one point where he was writing about George H.W. Bush in Shadow, which was going over, I think it was 5 presidencies, maybe 4 at the time. And he said George H.W. Bush looked out at the water and thought to himself, this, right? Whatever it was that he thought to himself. And I said, how do you know he thought that to himself? That the president didn't say it. He didn't interview him about that. These are the sort of suppositions that he has made in the past. Now, to quote James Comey, Lordy, there are tapes, and these tapes are damning to this president. The other part of this that I think is fascinating from an electoral standpoint is this, I think, gives Kamala Harris an opportunity in a debate against Mike Pence to ask him when he knew it. You remember, he was the one that was dealing and heading up that task force at the White House. He was the one that had the 45-day plan. Now, because we know what the president knew, when did the vice president know these things? I mean, these vice presidential debates are generally not sexy. They don't give you a lot. You don't get much from them. But in this case, you're going to take somebody, Mike Pence, who is more of a sort of mainstream conservative, very conservative Republican in that way. You're going to be able to say, look what this president said about COVID. You had to have known this, didn't you, Mr. Vice President? Be interesting to see how that comes out.
And also interesting, just the hypocrisy about being pro-life and then overseeing a pandemic and a president who downplayed it publicly and allowed people to continue carrying on with their lives. That led to hundreds of thousands of deaths potentially at the end of the year. It's probably going to be up to around 400,000 deaths by many models.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.